All right, ever feel like trust is this sort of mystical thing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's important, it's vital, especially when we're talking about leadership. But how do you actually, nail it down, especially in today's world when everything's changing faster than ever?
Right.
Well, get ready to unlock the vault on that because today's deep dive is all about trust.
Yes.
Why it's the not-so-secret weapon for leaders, especially when they're trying to navigate change.
And we've got a really fascinating mix of thinkers to unpack today, starting with Stephen Covey Jr.'s Speed of Trust, Patrick Lencioni's work on teams, and even a little splash of Brené Brown's work on vulnerability.
Oh, this is going to be good. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Covey's trust equation, it's almost like he's trying to quantify the unquantifiable, right?
Yeah, like he's saying this isn't just some wishy-washy feeling.
Right.
It's actually measurable. And he breaks it down like this. Character times competence equals results.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense on the
Yeah.
surface, right? But let's go a little deeper here.
Yeah.
I mean, character, competence, those are big words. How do they actually play out in the real world, let's say, if you're a leader trying to rally your team during a merger?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Imagine a leader during a merger. Character is about walking the talk, right? It's about being transparent about the good, the bad, and the uncertain. It's about showing genuine empathy for the anxieties that people are facing.
Okay.
Competence, on the other hand, that's about proving you can actually steer the ship through the stormy waters.
So it's not enough to just be a nice leader. You've got to be able to back it up with action and result.
100%. You have to demonstrate that you know what you're doing.
Yes.
And both Covey and Lencioni, they really hammer home this point that when both of those things, character and competence, are strong, something almost magical happens.
Yeah.
It's like trust lubricates the entire system. Teams move faster, they're more agile, and they can actually embrace change rather than feeling it.
I've definitely experienced that firsthand.
Yeah.
I was part of a team going through a major restructuring.
Yeah.
And our leader, she was the embodiment of this.
Wow.
She was honest about the challenges. She genuinely listened to our concerns. But she also had this knack for making even the toughest decisions. They felt like we were all in it together.
And that's exactly what trust does.
Yeah.
It creates that sense of shared purpose even amidst uncertainty.
Totally. So we've established trust, pretty darn important for leadership in general. But when things get shaky, when change is afoot, why is it even more crucial?
Well, because change is inherently unsettling.
Yes.
It just throws everything up in the air, and so people, they naturally resist it, right? Anxieties bubble up, and suddenly that sense of stability, who we are, what we do, it's all in question.
It's like that feeling you get when you're on a roller coaster, that moment of weightlessness right before the big drop.
Yes.
Right.
It's that feeling of, like, what's going to happen?
Exactly.
And that's where trust swoops in. It's like the ultimate safety harness.
Okay.
It provides that sense of security, that belief that even though things are changing around us, the core values, the relationships, the leadership, that remains solid.
Okay. So trust is our safety harness during times of change. But how does that actually play out in the real world? I mean, how does trust help teams navigate those inevitable rough waters?
So both Covey and Lencioni, they highlight a few key ways that this actually works.
Okay.
And the first is that trust fuels open communication.
Right.
When people trust their leader, and just as importantly, each other,
Yeah.
they're more likely to speak their minds, ask the tough questions, challenge the status quo.
That's huge, especially during times of change, right?
Correct.
You can't address what you don't know about.
Exactly.
But if there's no trust, people clam up, issues fester, and the whole change initiative can go sideways fast.
100%. And here's another critical piece, engagement and buy-in. So trust, it acts like a magnet, right? It draws people towards that shared vision, even if the path to get there is a little bumpy.
Yeah.
They're more likely to row in the same direction because they trust the process, and crucially, the people leading it.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yes.
Trust is what allows you to go far together through those choppy waters.
I love that analogy. And let's not forget resilience, right? Because setbacks, they're inevitable. Change is rarely linear. But when a team is rooted in trust, they can weather those storms so much more effectively.
It's like trust acts as a safety net.
Yes.
It allows people to take calculated risks, knowing that even if they stumble, they've got support.
Exactly. They're able to bounce back, learn from those mistakes, and ultimately they come out stronger on the other side. But there's another really fascinating layer to this whole trust equation,
Ooh.
something that might seem a little counterintuitive at first.
Intrigue. Lay it on me. What's this unexpected ingredient?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Now, that's not something you usually find in a leadership handbook.
Right.
We'll dive into why that is and how it works right after this quick break. And we're back. Okay, vulnerability. I'll admit it's not the first thing that comes to mind when I think strong leader.
Right. I mean, we tend to think of leaders as these unflappable figures
Yeah.
who have all the answers.
Right.
But Brené Brown's research, it throws a real curveball into that.
Okay, so how does vulnerability, something we often see as a weakness, right? How does that become an asset when we're talking about building trust?
It's about shifting our perspective a little bit. So vulnerability isn't about, airing your dirty laundry or oversharing.
Yeah.
It's really about having the courage to be authentic, to admit when you don't know something, to ask for help.
So how does that translate into leading effectively, especially when you're trying to navigate a team through a period of, like, major change?
Well, think about it. When a leader, when they're willing to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, or this is new territory for me too, it makes them incredibly relatable.
Right.
It humanizes them.
Instead of this sort of distant, unapproachable figure,
Exactly.
they become someone you can actually connect with.
Exactly. And that connection, that is at the heart of trust.
Okay.
Because, let's face it, people can smell inauthenticity a mile away.
Oh, yeah.
And when a leader is trying to project this image of perfection, it creates distance. It erodes trust.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And showing vulnerability is a way of showing you care.
Precisely. It demonstrates that you're not some infallible robot leader, but you're a human being trying to figure things out, just like everyone else.
Okay, so vulnerability can create connection, it can build trust.
Yeah.
But how does that actually play out in those pressure cooker moments when a team is facing, a major change, like the team we discussed earlier, trying to navigate a merger?
That's a great question. So remember that team we talked about, they were dealing with some internal friction after bringing in new members.
Right.
And they decided to put this idea of vulnerability into practice.
Okay.
They held a series of kind of open forums where the leadership team actually acknowledged their own anxieties, their own uncertainties about this merger.
Wow. That's a bold move. I mean, admitting they don't have all the answers, especially in that environment, I imagine that was a little nerve-wracking for them.
Oh, I'm sure it took a lot of courage. But the impact was undeniable. It created this wave of honesty and openness within the entire team.
Because it gave everyone permission to do the same.
Exactly. People felt safe to voice their own concerns, to ask questions, even to challenge decisions without fear of being shut down or ridiculed. It really shifted the whole dynamic.
That's incredible. So vulnerability isn't just some theoretical concept here. It's an actual practical tool that leaders can use to build trust and navigate change effectively.
Absolutely. And the best part is, it's a skill that can be learned and developed over time.
Okay, so let's get practical. For those leaders listening out there, what are some tangible steps they can take to cultivate trust within their teams, especially when they're facing these periods of change and uncertainty?
Well, for starters, they can take a page from Covey and Lencioni's playbooks.
Okay.
Walk the talk. Be consistent in your words and your actions. Show up with integrity. Be honest and transparent, even when it's difficult.
Because, I mean, those are the moments when it really counts, right?
Absolutely.
Anyone can, talk a good game when things are easy. It's your actions that speak volumes.
Exactly. And speaking of actions, demonstrating competence is key.
Okay.
Deliver on your promises. Show your team that you have the skills and the knowledge to lead them effectively.
Right.
Remember, competence, it builds trust just as much as character does.
Right. So walk the talk, deliver results, create that foundation of trust.
Right.
What else can leaders do to create an environment where trust can thrive, especially when you're talking about facing change?
That's where fostering psychological safety comes into play,
Okay.
which we touched on earlier. So leaders, they need to create a space where it's okay to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to ask for help, all without fear of judgment or retribution.
That's easier said than done, though, right? How can leaders actually foster this kind of environment?
It starts with modeling those behaviors themselves.
Okay.
Be open about your own challenges, ask your team for their input, and acknowledge when you make mistakes. Be the change you want to see.
Basically, show them that it's okay to be human.
Exactly. And when people feel safe to be themselves without having to put on this facade of perfection, that's when the magic happens.
Okay.
They're more likely to bring their A game, to be innovative, and to fully engage in that process of change, even when it's messy.
It's like you create this feedback loop of trust.
Yes.
The more vulnerable and authentic you are as a leader, the safer your team feels, the more likely they are to reciprocate that.
Exactly. And that creates this virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Where trust breeds confidence, which breeds even greater trust, and so on.
I love it. What else can leaders do to keep that trust flowing, especially during times of change when communication is more critical than ever?
Communication. And I don't just mean sending out a company-wide email once a month.
Right.
It's about fostering this open, two-way communication where people feel heard, they feel respected. Leaders need to be actively soliciting feedback, holding regular check-ins, and being available to answer questions.
So being present and engaged.
Yes.
And not just physically present, but mentally and emotionally present.
Exactly. And don't forget about active listening.
Okay.
It's not enough to just hear the words that people are saying. You have to really listen and try to understand their perspective. It's about showing that genuine empathy and desire to understand.
Active listening. Got it. What else?
Keep your commitments. This one seems obvious.
Yeah.
But it is so easy to overpromise and underdeliver, especially in the midst of change when things are in flux.
Right.
But every broken promise, it chips away at that foundation of trust that you've worked so hard to build.
I can see how that would erode trust really quickly.
Oh, absolutely.
So underpromise and overdeliver.
That's a good strategy. Be realistic about what you can deliver on, and then do what you say you're going to do consistently.
Honesty and follow through. Two essential ingredients for building trust.
Absolutely. And finally, empower your team. Delegate responsibility, give them autonomy, and trust them to do the work.
Because micromanaging, that's like the antithesis of trust.
Yes.
Right? It sends a message that you don't have confidence in their abilities.
Exactly. When you trust your team, it shows that you believe in them. And that can be so motivating. It allows them to rise to the occasion.
Okay, so we've got a pretty solid list of actionable steps here.
We do.
Walk the talk, deliver results, create psychological safety, over-communicate, honor commitments, and empower your team. It's quite a list, but it seems like these principles could be applied in all sorts of situations, not just within, the workplace.
Absolutely. Trust is foundational to any healthy relationship, whether it's with your colleagues, your family, your friends, your partner. These principles are universally applicable.
So by focusing on these principles, we can strengthen not only our professional lives, but our personal lives as well. We'll be back right after this short break to dive into how a real-world leadership team use these principles to navigate a challenging period of change. And we're back. Before the break, we were talking about, tangible ways to build trust, especially in the workplace.
Right.
But, sometimes it's those real-world examples that really bring these concepts to life.
Yeah.
You mentioned a leadership team going through a particularly rough patch.
Mm-hmm.
What can we learn from their experience?
Yeah. So this team, they were tasked with leading this international business unit through a massive shift, both in terms of their strategy and their culture.
So no small feat.
No.
A lot at stake. And on top of that, they're trying to integrate new team members, which, as we know, can be a recipe for friction.
Right.
Especially when trust is low.
Big time. Yeah, and here's the thing. They'd actually done the work.
Okay.
Like they embraced a lot of these principles of trust we've been talking about, the transparency, the vulnerability, you name it.
Right.
And it really came into play when things got tough.
Okay, how so? Give us the details.
So instead of kind of trying to downplay the challenges or pretend that everything was rosy, they got real with their team.
Okay.
They acknowledged the difficulties, the uncertainties, even the anxieties that people were feeling.
Wow. So they walked the walk even when it was uncomfortable.
Yes.
Did it make a difference?
It was huge. By being upfront and acknowledging the elephant in the room, it allowed other people to feel like they could share their concerns, their ideas, even if those ideas weren't exactly music to the leadership team's ears.
Right, that open communication. It wasn't just a one-time thing, right?
Yeah.
Like during some team-building retreat or something, it sounds like it became part of their DNA.
Totally. Yeah, and because they'd committed to that mutual support, remember that team agreement, they were able to actually work through some of those differences constructively.
Yeah, instead of just shutting down the dissenting opinions, which I think is, tempting to do when you're under pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
They leaned into that discomfort.
It's like they saw those different opinions as valuable data points,
Yeah.
not threats.
They were willing to be challenged, admit they didn't have all the answers, which, again, takes a lot of courage, especially when you're in a leadership position.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so, drum roll, please. Tell us they achieved world peace. But seriously, what happened? Did this trust-building approach actually work?
Well, they didn't achieve world peace, but they not only successfully implemented those, pretty huge strategic and cultural changes,
Right.
but they did it with this level of teamwork and efficiency that they hadn't really experienced before.
Okay.
People were engaged, they were bought in, they were willing to go the extra mile.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Real, tangible results.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, their commitment to building trust wasn't just some, feel-good leadership exercise. It actually gave them a competitive edge.
100%.
Mm.
It's proof that trust is not just this fluffy concept, this leadership buzzword. It's a force multiplier. It amplifies everything else.
Oh, I love that. This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
So much more than just defining trust. We really went deep on why it matters, how it works, but most importantly, how to actually cultivate it.
Yeah, totally.
And what's really exciting is that this isn't just about, leadership in a traditional sense, right? These principles, they apply to any relationship where trust is paramount.
Your team at work, your family, your friendships, it all comes back to that connection of vulnerability.
It does.
So as we wrap up today, if you, dear listener, could take away just one thing from this deep dive, it's this. Trust isn't something that just happens. It's a conscious choice. It's a practice we have to cultivate every single day.
That's right.
And it starts with a simple question. How can I be more trustworthy in my interactions? How can I show up with more authenticity, more vulnerability, more genuine care for the people around me?
Such an important question.
Because in a world that often feels really transactional, really divided, trust is that bridge that connects us. It's the foundation upon which we build meaningful relationships and ultimately achieve extraordinary things together.
I love that. Beautifully said.
That's it for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time.